Tell us about what you're building at Basis.
Yeah, so we build an AI platform for accounting teams. So we have long-running agents that are able to actually do real work for accounting teams that allows them to automate a substantial portion of the manual work that's involved in doing this accounting work. We currently serve about 30% of the top 25 firms in the country and 20% of the top 150. And we're essentially allowing those firms to take on a bunch more accounting work on the back of these AI agents.
And how did you get into accounting here? What do you have, accountants in the family? Were you an accountant in a past life? How did you get so passionate about this space?
Great question. Well, I personally have no background in accounting. Mitch, who I started the company with, has a background in accounting and was working at an accounting technology company. My route to accounting is slightly circuitous, but maybe potentially interesting. I was focused on machine learning projects in healthcare, was working with a bunch of healthcare organizations, and I had a kind of crazy realization in that process of working with healthcare organizations, which is if you go to any hospital in the US and just ask a very simple question, which is how much does it cost us as the hospital to provide a procedure to a patient. Let's say, Akash, you're going to go get an X-ray or an MRI or something like this at a hospital system. There's really no hospital in America that can actually answer that question for themselves. And this is just a ridiculous proposition because if you're a hospital, you should probably have at least two goals. One is to increase the quality of care for people, and the other is to reduce the cost of care for people. And if you can't actually measure the cost to serve in the first place, you really don't know whether you're getting better or worse at that second objective over any given period of time. You don't really know how the decisions you're making as an organization are affecting one of the core outcomes of your organization. And so, our view is that that is one of the core jobs of accounting. That fundamentally, accounting is about structuring and systematizing all of the economic activity that happens in and around an organization so that people can understand it. There are certain compliance things that accountants have to do, like doing the appropriate structuring and systematizing for preparing a tax return or other filings for preparing for an audit. But there's all this other accounting work that simply doesn't get done
Right,
that we could do and probably should do. And
right.
so this kind of realization got me quite interested in the importance of accounting in the functioning of our market economy and led us to start thinking about what we could build. And then as we started thinking about, okay, how can we leverage the emergent abilities of these large models to sort of change the way that we work, it became very clear that there was a significant opportunity to do this in accounting. And then we started building, and we're fortunate to find a lot of excitement among the initial set of firms that we started working with.
Okay, so that's a great story. Now, it leads me to my next question, which is that how did you get all of these investors participating in your round? Because I'm just going to read some of the names here, and it's not a small list. I mean, Excel led the round, but then, I mean, you have Coastal Ventures on board. Then you've got Lloyd Blankfein, Nat Friedman, Daniel Ghost, Aaron Levy, Jack Altman, Kyle Vogt, Adam D'Angelo. I mean, how do you get all these people on board, man?
Well, we appreciate the question, and we're very fortunate to have a great group of folks around the table. I think one of the things that we think is really important is as you're trying to build a company, there's so many important questions that come up. Oftentimes, we like to try to think about them from first principles, but there's so much scar tissue that other people have that they have, think experiences that they had that are useful to us as we think through these decisions. So having folks around the table that we can loop in and who have some context on the company when we come across these various items is super helpful. And we
Right,
found
but how? I mean, how did you get such an all-star roster? I mean, what did you learn about fundraising? It's a big valuation.
that.
It's a lot of money. I mean, what surprised you about the funding process? What did you learn through it? I mean, there are people watching the show that are going to be doing fundraising themselves too. How do you get these executives on board?
I think I've come to realize over time that the most important thing about fundraising is just to build a great business, to have a clear vision of where you want to go, to state that vision very clearly, and then to execute against that vision. At each sort of stage of the company, we put together a memo where we just write out, this is what we're going to do as a company. And then when we get to the next stage, we look back and say, did we accomplish those things? And what are we going to do going forward? And I think being extremely clear about what you're trying to do and then delivering against those results is a clear recipe for success. I think if you do those things, a lot of the other aspects in terms from a fundraising perspective take care of themselves. People want to be involved in the company because they think there's something interesting going on. And so you're able to bring a great group together. So really it's as simple as that. And we've just been fortunate that a lot of folks who have great experiences in various areas have participated in the company and been great advocates for us.
So you're building agents, and outside of talent, what's the biggest cost for you right now? I imagine compute is pretty significant.
Absolutely. For us, they're clear two. Number one is talent. Number two,
Yeah. So how do you manage compute costs? I mean, I know you're early, and margins are still something that you probably may want to worry about second after you develop the product. But I mean, what's the advice that all these advisors are giving you about how to manage those compute costs, which they're kind of slow to come down?
Yeah, I think there are two things to think about. The first is how do you manage compute costs today, and what's the impact of that on margins going forward? I actually think there are two totally different questions. Our view, at least internally, is that the cost per unit of intelligence has dropped precipitously over the last couple years, and we expect that to continue. I think if you believe that, trying to calculate the margin profile today is useful as a point of reference, but it doesn't actually tell you that much about the margin profile going forward. The other factor, of course, is that as the abilities of these models continue to improve, the types of things that you can do continue to expand, that you can provide more value to your customers, you can take on more complex workflows. And so you're constantly doing more things as the margin profile changes. So I think it's very difficult to forecast those things. We're quite confident that if you just drive significant value, if you're able to essentially end-to-end complete a lot of these workflows, that the margin profile makes a lot of sense. And so then today, the question in terms of managing compute costs is making sure that you have good visibility into what the agents are doing, how much inference they're using for various tasks, and to make sure that you're not that you're sort of operating in the best possible way. And so we just have a system that essentially monitors that with a fair amount of granularity across all the various things that the AI is able to do. We keep an eye on that and make sure that it's in check with sort of the expectations that we have. And if it's not, then we take a look, and there are usually ways to optimize it if it's not. So that's our approach to it. I do
Right.
think that the question of monitoring today and thinking about long-term margins are actually largely independent, at least in terms of how we look at it.
And very quickly, are you using OpenClaw at all? You're in the agents world. Are you using it?
We certainly don't use it for any of the work that we do in terms of building agents for customers.
Yeah.
I think there are lessons from OpenClaw about how to.
But personally, I mean, could you see a roadmap at all? In which your personal use of it maybe could start to come into play with the program?
That's a great question. Uh, I think there are lessons about from OpenClaw about giving agents autonomy, using as much intelligence as possible that probably are pervasive elsewhere and that you can learn from. We actually have a bit of a different approach, which is that we have a team internally called Atlas, whose only job is to make everyone at the company 10x more efficient, and that includes me and includes everyone else at the company. A large part of what they do is they figure out what's the internal infrastructure we need to build as a company so that we can essentially let agents loose to complete all sorts of various workflows in the most secure way possible. And of course, OpenClaw, I think, has all sorts of security challenges. It has all sorts of challenges in terms of collaborating across companies. And so a lot of the internal infrastructure that we build essentially allows us to put similar, very capable long-running agents to go work on various tasks, but in a very safe and contained way. And so I think you might call that a version of OpenClaw in some sense. It's giving it wide-ranging access to various things and sort of empowering it to take on large tasks, but doing it with core company infrastructure. And so that's part of what we've been building for almost a year at this point internally, which gets you, I think, a lot of the benefits that people have started to realize with OpenClaw.
Great. Well, Matt, I want to thank you for coming on. That is Matt Harpe, the CEO and co-founder of Basis here on TITV.